Here with the latest on stimulus. There have been suggestions that the current COVID relief bill be separated from the government funding bill, which includes foreign aid spending that has been labeled as calloused during a time that Americans are suffering. Unfortunately, the COVID relief bill itself includes language that makes it contingent upon the government funding bill. This means the COVID relief bill can't be separated from the government funding bill, at least the way it stands now. Classic Congress, making it impossible to actually get work done. At midnight last night, unemployment benefits of $300 evaporated for 13 million Americans. That's because there is no retroactive unemployment date, and that $300 is now lost. This means even if the bill of $600 stimulus checks were signed into law now, people would receive 10 weeks of unemployment benefits instead of 11. Next week at this time, unemployed workers will have lost yet another $300. Last night, Donald Trump also increased his demand of $2,000 stimulus checks to $2,000 stimulus checks plus $2,000 per dependent. He also continues to demand changes to Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act to limit the flagging of his tweets on Twitter by removing liability protections for Twitter. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows reiterated this issue and the desire to change Section 230, but made no mention of stimulus talks. This, by the way, is increasing complications for the Senate to join Donald Trump and actually get something done. That is, Senate Republicans to actually join in the fight with Donald Trump to get something done, because Trump, after all, has been bashing Senate Republicans on Twitter, especially yesterday when he called them out for not standing with him on election disputes. Unfortunately now, the more time goes on, the less likely Donald Trump is to actually sign this bill. And after all, this is compounded by the fact that it seems that every day goes by, we have more demands from Donald Trump. Remember, on Tuesday, Donald Trump said, no $600, let's do $2,000 stimulus checks. On Wednesday, it was NDAA, let's veto that. And we want Section 230 changes. On Friday, it was Lindsey Graham saying, yeah, I know y'all have been thinking Trump might get watered down and end up going for the $600. No, Trump is doubling down. He wants the $2,000 stimulus checks. And on Saturday, it was Trump who said, no, I don't only want those things. I also want $2,000 for dependents, because after all, this was China's fault. His quote. At some point, as desirable as these amounts sound, though, we have to ask ourselves if we're actually going to end up seeing anything at all, because the higher the ask goes, the more likely it is we end up getting zero. Politico reported this morning the following. The president's aides and allies are working to try to get him to reverse his stance and just sign the $600 package. This isn't working. Now, while we know the $600 tiny checks in the flowchart here on screen are, well, tiny checks, we do know that this bill, if Trump does sign it, does provide that $300 in unemployment for at least those 10 weeks now, that $100 as a boost for the mixed status workers, the PPP, the EIDL grants, the end to surprise billing, the $82 billion for schools, the $5 billion for mental health and addiction services, $45 billion for transportation, healthcare relief fund $35 billion, nutrition and hunger, the boost to the SNAP program, $13 billion. A lot of the free food programs, they end this year, and I've had those linked down in the description for months now. 3% pay raise to the military, that's in the funding bill, but that's also being held up. Vaccine distribution money, that's being held up. The child care support funding, the broadband support funding, the energy tax credits, those get delayed. The rental assistance of $25 billion. And of course, beyond that, there are even some things, not necessarily the most politically popular, but there are a lot of other things in here. The tax credits, employee retention credit, the paid sick leave, the Pell Grant expansion, the business meal deduction, money for the border walls in here, beer, wine, liquor tax cuts, work opportunity tax credits. There is a ton of stuff in that COVID relief bill, and all of it is at the moment being held up as we wait for Donald Trump to make a determination with Senate Republicans on what the next step is going to be. Now, in terms of deadlines, we know the next big one is Tuesday and then Wednesday. Keep in mind that on Wednesday, unless Congress passes a funding bill on Tuesday and Trump signs it, the government will shut down. We also know that the House will take up a roll call vote on 3 issues tomorrow: the NDAA, a continuing resolution to fund the government, and $2,000 stimulus checks, which will be the first opportunity we'll really get to see how much Republican support there is for these $2,000 stimulus checks. Since Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans have been mostly dead quiet on this topic, we have no idea. At least this test in the House of Representatives will be a little bit of a litmus test to see what the attitudes are like for $2,000 stimulus checks amongst Republicans. This morning, multiple senators and representatives made the rounds on news circuits. I watched almost all of them. Representative Paul Mitchell, a Republican, believes it's very possible that Trump will refuse to sign the continuing resolution. That means the government will be shutting down, so that he, ultimately, Donald Trump, can maximize his leverage and get his demands for larger checks and Section 230 changes. I personally had believed that it was likely Donald Trump would sign the continuing resolution because Donald Trump doesn't need more leverage than he already has, but Paul Mitchell says, don't hold your breath. Trump might want to go for all the leverage he can get. Pat Toomey, a Republican senator who made waves for holding up the stimulus bill with his Federal Reserve requirement, told Fox News that if Trump shuts down the government and does not sign a COVID package, Trump will be, quote, remembered for the chaos and misery and erratic behavior of his administration. This is unique coming from a Republican that just had a very tense standoff with Democrats. Senator Chris Coons, who is a Democrat, says that Trump is a reality star who knows how to leave people with a cliffhanger ending to a TV show. And that's what we're getting. Now, Senator Chris Coons also believes that Donald Trump will end up U-turning and signing this bill. This was Bernie Sanders' reaction, and this is his advice to Donald Trump. I'm only going to play about the last 30 seconds of this, though. I'm not going to play all of it. Bernie Sanders did just post this on his Twitter this morning.
Sign the bill, the COVID relief bill, right now, and get on the phone. Talk to Mitch McConnell in the Senate. Talk to McCarthy in the House. Get Republicans on board. That $2,000 check, we can pass that on Tuesday, which will be a very good holiday present to millions of people who are struggling. But, Mr. President, if you have any ounce of decency in your heart, do not cause intense and increase economic pain for so many people. Sign the COVID relief bill, and then let us pass that $2,000 a person check. Thank you.
This is interesting because it's Bernie Sanders suggesting, hey, let's just pass the COVID bill we have now, and then let's come back and do the $2,000 checks separately after we pass this bill that has all of the other items in it. Also, Bernie Sanders admits to being wrong about Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, saying, quote, everybody, that Mnuchin was representing the White House. Speaking of Mnuchin, the Washington Post this morning had a pretty detailed article about how loyal Treasury Secretary Mnuchin has been to Donald Trump and how he may have possibly just gotten burned, despite him celebrating the COVID relief agreement as a wonderful birthday present to himself. Now, the article says here, and it's an interesting snippet, during one December 15th meeting, Pelosi repeatedly tried pressing Mnuchin about the president's position on direct payments, stimulus checks. Attending the meeting were Pelosi, McConnell, Schumer, and McCarthy, with Mnuchin calling in via speakerphone located in the middle of Pelosi's conference room. Pelosi asked Mnuchin 4 separate times to explain the president's position on direct payments, but Mnuchin did not, according to 2 people who spoke on a condition of anonymity to discuss the private meeting. According to these people, Pelosi grew frustrated and at one point exclaimed, "Come on, Stephen." And this is where Senator Mark Warner is quoted saying, from the beginning, Mnuchin has had a very tough job working with Donald Trump. And unfortunately, everyone who ends up trying to speak for Donald Trump ends up having their legs cut out from under them eventually. Now, some of this is a little bit harsh towards Donald Trump, but it's also coming from both sides. So it'll be very interesting to see how united Congress is in responding to Donald Trump, especially when there appears to be a huge gulf between how Donald Trump is responding to this COVID situation regarding this legislation and how Congress intended to respond to it. Then we hear from Chuck Fleischmann, a Republican representative from Tennessee. He said, "We all left Washington thinking we'd get this compromise deal done." He agrees that the deal is inefficient, but at least it helps a bit, especially with unemployment aid, rental relief, and airline aid. However, now Chuck says he's getting inundated with calls from people very upset about wasteful spending on the budget bill, and that this could actually end up making a COVID relief bill harder to get passed because they're contingent upon one another. Representative Adam Kinzinger says he will vote against Donald Trump despite being a Republican, and he will support the COVID relief bill and believes that the votes are here to override the NDAA. He even goes as far as saying that Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act has nothing to do with national defense and says it shouldn't be considered a part of the NDAA. If Adam Kinzinger is right, then Congress might override the president's veto on the NDAA, and that means Donald Trump's leverage to get changes to Section 230 could go away, and Donald Trump is making stimulus contingent upon Section 230 changes, which could create even more issues. This Republican representative ended by saying that Trump is just trying to burn the place down on the way out. And again, some of this is very rough, but I'm only reporting it because I'm providing insights from Democrats and from Republicans. Right now, the only Republicans who haven't exactly defended Donald Trump, but have sided with Donald Trump not signing the COVID relief bill, are folks like Rand Paul or Ted Cruz, who just don't want to spend any money and say the proper way to solve the COVID problem is just to open up. Speaking of COVID, Reuters reports that in the United States last week, someone died from COVID every 33 seconds. The TSA is seeing record amounts of travel this week, which many experts are also concerned will lead to a spike in deaths within the next couple of months. Dr. Fauci said this morning that the worst is ahead of us. If any of this makes you concerned, get your life insurance in the link.